The most interesting guests in the music industry, entertainment, art, and politics step into the studio for Turning Point with Frank MacKay. And now, Turning Point with Frank MacKay.
Welcome to Turning Point. Our very special guest today, from the business of music and the world of music, Peter Rafelson. Peter, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Peter, you're a writer, a producer. You're based out of New York. Were you born in New York?
I'm actually based out of L.A., but I was born in New York, and I still consider myself somewhat of a New Yorker at heart.
But you're kind of bi-coastal.
True.
How did you get into music?
You know, I came from a long line of filmmakers, entertainment business. My great uncle, Samson Rafelson, was a screenplay writer, and he wrote big shows like The Jazz Singer, the first movie with sound, starring Al Jolson. He also did all the Lubitsch movies like Heaven Can Wait. Then my father, in the 60s, got into television and film and created shows like The Monkees, went on to produce movies like Easy Rider. He and my godfather, Jack Nicholson, made about 10 or 12 movies together, including Five Easy Pieces and King of Marvin Gardens and a bunch of others. And I really grew up in the heart of Hollywood, and by the time I was 8 or 9, of course, I was living with and around a lot of the folks that were making movies and in them and on TV. The Monkees, a great example. And I kind of just really, it was very natural for me. When the Monkees broke up, my parents were at the Cannes Film Festival with Easy Rider, and a big van pulled up to my home in Hollywood, and a worker came out and said, yeah, we got the Monkees instruments here, and what should we do with them? And of course, I was the little boy at the house, and I impishly said, well, why don't you put them in my basement? And I spent the next 2 years, without my parents knowing, learning how to play every one of those instruments. And by the time I was 12 years old, I was pretty accomplished. And then, of course, with all my additional studies and education of music, I just really got into it at a very early age. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And by the time I was graduating high school, I'd already begun attending music colleges. So I really got a head start just from both circumstance, from education, and desire. And I that's really how I got into it.
Your dad is Bob.
Yeah.
And his connection to the Monkees, I'm sure
he was creator. He directed and produced, and his partner, Bert Schneider, and he had a company called Raybert, which you'll see on every one of the episodes. And eventually they formed BBS, which was the most pioneering of the independent film movement companies in Hollywood.
Did they do Head?
They did. My father directed Head.
And what was his relationship with Don Kirshner?
Don was brought in as one of the expert music supervisors, and for better or for worse, he had his way of doing things. And of course, you probably know that the Monkees resented the fact that they weren't really allowed to do that much in the process in the studio, except for singing.
Yeah.
And although they may have felt like puppets, eventually they got more and more involved, and they were known as a fabricated band. But the truth be told, they had a lot of talent themselves, and it showed in their later works. And to this day, they continue to make records and tour, themselves. So Don obviously was a businessman and very well respected. And at the time, being that the show was a network show, I'm sure that he was approved to be in charge of music.
I think you're too young to remember the Brill Building, or at least
I know it well. In fact, Lester Sill, who came from the Brill Building, created Screen Gems publishing division, which in fact is where all of the greatest writers available, Bob Boyce and Hart, Neil Diamond,
Carole King.
Jerry Goffin, Carole King, all of them contributed to the Monkees albums, and Lester was involved in that.
Well, I meant, were you able to see it in action?
Oh yeah. I was young, but I was there. I was on the set. I was in the studio. This was part of my education. Like I said, I got a real head start being sort of on the inside looking out, and what a tremendous movement of pop music and culture that really kind of set the bar very high for me.
I always find that the pool of people, or the concept of a pool of people, and it's almost hard to find a parallel that equals the Brill Building and the history there, but the idea that all of these artists, all of these songwriters are competing with each other, and you had the Neil Diamonds and the Neil Sedaka's and the Jerry Goffins and Carole Kings. You had all of the Ellie Greenwich. You had all of these people working.
Not to mention Lieber and Stoller and Lieber.
Yeah, right. You have all of these people, and in essence, they're setting up a competition, and they could hear each other through the walls, and the romance of that is just unbelievable to me. And I think, and again, this is from a layman's standpoint in the sense that I wasn't there, and I wasn't there firsthand, and I just know what I know through reading and documentaries and so forth. But you have a situation where you're getting better because the competition is better. You have that a little bit, your family history. I mean, you have a lineage, and
yeah, it's really a legacy. You're right, Frank, and I mean, it's as much of a blessing as it is a curse in that. You come from, you're surrounded by creatives, and they happen to be your family, and a lot of kids who've come up under the shadow or in the shadow of famous people or successful people, really across all sectors of business, they tend to be stifled or penalized by the fact that their parents are more successful than they could ever hope to be. Plus, there's the stigma of being known as only the son of. And for me, I think that's what really inspired me to kind of carve my own path away from the film business and get more and more into music. Now, that said, it's in my bones so much as that by the time I was, early 90s, I was in my 30s, I started directing again. So music, though, pulled me back into my heritage, but it wasn't my heritage.
Are you working with like a Pro Tools setup now, or are you still analog?
Oh, yeah, no, I own 8 recording studios and a full post facility, and RMC Studios, which stands for Rafelson Media. Everything I do is RM, Rafelson Media Studios. My gosh, 7 of the top 10 albums were made here. Not only my own stuff, but, I mean, geez, Lady Gaga, Taylor Swift, Pink, Daughtry, Jason Mraz.
Wow.
Beyonce's last album. Every one of those albums was finished here in my studio, and it's just a blessing to not only have the facility for my own use, but to be surrounded and in contact with so many of the top stars and talent in this business. It's tough, and they come to where I am, so I'm very blessed.
Now, where are you? Are you talking L.A. or are you talking New York?
North Hollywood is where the facilities are. New York is where I spend time mostly doing business, but the creative and production and mixing and recording all go down in North Hollywood.
Have you done any work with Rodney Jerkins out there?
He was right next to me in the building next door to me, and I've never actually worked with him directly. We've worked on the same projects. He now has a home that he records out of, but certainly he's one of the pros in the biz, and ironically, he was working right next door to me with Janet Jackson and various other artists.
A lot of talent between the two of your studios, that's for sure. What was your first big break in the music business?
On my 21st birthday, a female friend had called, and she was in the presence of one of the members of Rufus, which was a band that had Chaka Khan as the lead singer. And on my 21st birthday, I played over the phone a track that I was working on, and they immediately fell in love with it, and that was the first song I'd actually had commercially released. It was called Blinded by the Boogie. And of course, that plus growing up around so many people. I mean, I can tell you stories. When I was a young kid, I remember Bob Dylan, the Beatles, James Taylor, all in my living room one evening, and that was just a common thing because we were kind of the hub of a social circle. And I remember coming downstairs and telling them to all, please be quiet, because I had to go to school in the morning. and these were just, people that would come in and out of our lives, and it was remarkable how much exposure I had. Very, very, very fortunate. But in terms of actually professional working, I had worked very hard at becoming an accomplished musician, and then on top of that, studying music. So by the time I was, approaching 20, I'd already begun doing a lot of session work. I was very highly in demand session player, primarily guitar and keys. And after I started getting my first cuts with groups like Rufus, Sister Sledge, I then was brought in as a writer, because I not only could program and play all the tracks on these records, but I also had access to submit songs. Julio Iglesias, Anne Murray, these are classic older artists that I was the young Turk, playing on their albums and eventually getting songs on. And the whole time I was also struggling to be an artist, musician. I had bands, played in all the classic clubs out here, the Troubadour. I remember one night I was playing at the Troubadour with a group called Ray Love, which was a friend of mine, Bobby Ray Love, back in the day. And the girls in the band were drinking Jack Daniels on stage, and in the midst of one of the songs, they just passed out, literally fainted. And without batting an eye, I was playing guitar, and I literally stepped over the body and up to the mic and finished the set as the lead singer. And at that point, I realized, I don't really necessarily want to have my career held back by other people. And that's when I realized I had to go out, get some technology, which in those days was not even MIDI synthesizers. These were called voltage control sequencers. And I started creating the entire tracks by myself and really producing everything on my own. And that took me into a whole other realm, which was computers and the future of music production, which to this day has just changed everything.
Where did you, before you had your own studio, where did you like to work out of? What studio?
Well, it's funny, I always say that the barrier to entry in this business back in 70s and 80s, when I was getting started, was studio time, and it was the most expensive part of production. Anybody could write, but being able to make a recording was the difficult part. And I worked in almost every studio around town, but to get my own time to develop my own material, it was always a political thing, and of course who you knew. And we would sneak into the studios where I was working from the time the sessions were over till the time the janitors kicked us out the next morning, and that's where I cut my teeth. Now, I'll give you another example. I had written a song that I wanted to get to Cyndi Lauper, and it was a song that I'd written by myself, and I thought she'd be perfect for it. And I met a kid along the way who had full access to a studio, and he said that he could also help get the song to Cyndi Lauper. So I made him a writer on the song, and over the course of a year, we would go and use the studio that he had access to. And that song was Open Your Heart.
Was that unique? Was the studio unique?
Was it unique?
The studio itself, was it unique?
You mean the name of it, or was it a unique studio?
The name of it.
No, it wasn't actually. It was Robbie Weaver, who's Dennis Weaver's son, owned a studio.
Ah.
Now, here's the fun part. When the demo was done, it never made it to Cyndi Lauper. But in that studio, there was a reel-to-reel demo tape that was scheduled to go off to Madonna's office. And I called up my friend and said, listen, if you don't put our song on that tape, I'll never speak to you again. And he did not put the song on the tape. That night, I put on a ski mask and broke into the studio, scaled the fence, jimmied my way in, and I personally recorded Open Your Heart on the end of that tape. And when Madonna heard the song, of course, it was unlisted. I didn't write anything on the box. And when she cut the song, she looked at the box and told the writers of the last song on the demo tape listed that she had recorded their song. Well, I was terribly depressed, and everybody who was on the tape that had their names on it were bragging that they'd gotten a Madonna cut, and I didn't want to hear about it. Well, about a month later, I heard a bootleg of a Madonna session, and guess what song it was? And my eyes lit up, and I had to keep it a secret because I didn't want to really tell anybody what had gone down. So the hardest part of my life was was seeing Madonna every night at a nightclub called Helena's, where I'd go. In fact, I even met her and sat with her and Sean Penn and Warner's guys, and everybody was around, and I never said a word. When I found out that the song had made it on the album and that they'd shipped 600,000 units, that's when I called. And I called the lawyers, and I said, hey, guys, that's my song. And they said, no, that's not your song. And I said, yes, it is. I've got the original demo, blah, blah, blah. They got very nervous, and they called me back and said, listen, here's the deal. If you don't give up your publishing on that song to Madonna, you're not getting it on the record. And I knew that it had already shipped. And I said, fine, take it off the record. And the first 600,000 units, because they'd gotten late notice of who I was, actually misspelled my name on it. So the first platinum plaque I have on that True Blue album actually spells my name with a PH, and then they corrected it and got it with the F later. But that was a moment.
Yeah.
In my life that I'll never forget.
Oh, I imagine. I mean, it was a number one hit.
It sold over 30 million records. It's been number one many times by many artists, including most recently, again, on the TV show Glee soundtrack, Power of Madonna. And it just keeps on coming back. She is performing it regularly, nightly, in her current tour, which is a big deal. And it's one of the only songs that she continues to include in her set.
We're speaking with Peter Rafelson.
Turning Point with Frank MacKay returns right after this. Welcome back to Turning Point with Frank MacKay.
We're speaking with Peter Rafelson. Let's talk to the audience who may be struggling. You mentioned the word struggling, right? Struggling to make it in the music business, either as writers or producers or whatever. First of all, do you know every time there's a new version? Like, are you up on that song? You're not directly involved in the mechanical license.
No, and the truth is that once a song has been released commercially and what we call published, technically anybody can record it as long as they do what's called a license, and the types of licenses that are required once and after it's been released the first time don't really require much notification. They just basically require payments. So you try to keep up on it, and part of the challenge in the music business is to be aware of what happens with your own material once it leaves your possession.
Now, do you, on that particular song, do you maintain any of the publishing share of the publishing?
All of it.
All of it. Not just the writers, but the publishing
Yep,
itself.
yep. And by the way, as a businessman, I have 2 labels, 3 publishing companies, and I'm very aggressive about taking publishing from writers, much like I was when I started out. And I just want to say to the world out there that it really comes down to getting into business with somebody and giving them a reason to be vested in your material. Now, that said, if somebody could do with my material what I do with theirs, meaning get it exploited and get paid, I would to this day gladly give up my publishing. I always tell people, listen, don't be too precious about anything, because unless it's the only hit song you're ever going to write, let it go, and you can write another one. Your resources internally, creatively, are infinite, inexhaustible. So just the more material you have out there and the more people that have an interest in that material, the more parties that are interested in the material, meaning have a piece of it, the better likelihood they will all champion your work. Don't try to hold back. I remember one of the big breaks I had was this Julio Iglesias cut I had. He's a huge international artist. And certainly it was a break for me, and I wound up with 10% of that song. And I'm to this day very thankful.
We're speaking with Peter Rafelson, a music producer, songwriter, musician extraordinaire. And Peter, you've gone through some transitions, or the music business has gone through some transitions, and you've kind of been at the foot of it all. You saw the Brill Building, or the end of what Tin Pan Alley may have looked like, or at least part of Tin Pan Alley may have looked like, and then you got into the 70s and 80s type music business, I guess prior to MTV, and then you saw firsthand with people like Madonna what MTV can do for a song and so forth. And then we're in a whole new world now. I mean, the shopping process, just shopping a deal, shopping a record deal, is completely different. I mean, would you agree? I mean, it's social media or some type.
Well, the word is media. You nailed it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I can only tell you that it's nothing new if you go back far enough. But there was a period where music in and of itself was a business, and it stood alone and separate. But let's not forget that the studios that created musicals for both film and on Broadway were both an integration of music and other forms of entertainment and media, right? So really it started out that way. If you go into the industry of entertainment, before that, of course, you had player pianos and musicians, and it was all live before there was the existence of a recording device. But that said, when it really took off, it was the integration of music into other forms of media. Then most people think of music as a standalone business, which it was for the longest time. And with the advent of internet and piracy, that became worthless. So we've returned to the point that the music has value in so much as what it is connected to. That could be a social experience. It's driving connections and social behavior. So the money comes not only from whatever sales you can still get, but what the effect of the music is. And then, of course, licensing into films and television, which is another form of media and experience. It's really a tool. It's not just a product, but it's a tool to create business. And if you can find ways to get that music and leverage it into other forms of business, whether it be advertising, whether it be soundtracks, whether it be social media, whether it be live shows, whether it be merchandise, whether it be selling, and branding is the key word, because all brands need some sort of identity, and music is part of that. That's where you're going to find the golden nuggets. Music by itself, I always tell people, music doesn't make you money. Music makes you famous. and fame makes you money. As a writer, you constantly are looking for opportunities, and just to put your stuff on iTunes today, which anybody can do, is not necessarily the answer. If it's not connected to a bigger brand or an advertising campaign or marketing, it's more of a hobby.
Do you remember your first big check from songwriting?
Oh boy. Yeah, sure I do. In fact, I could tell you that what I did for a living for quite some time was walk from my kitchen to my mailbox. I mean, the money kept coming and coming, and I didn't even know where or how or why. Obviously, I knew that I had hits, but to give you some sense of the difference in the size of the market, when I had my first big number one on Madonna, it was Open Your Heart. It was on the top 100, and by the time it had hit number one, it had already sold 9 million records. Now, fast forward 30 years. Same song, Open Your Heart. Same chart, top 100. Same basic scenario, 187,000 records. So we're at about a 27th of the size of what it once was, and I still have number one. And you know, the numbers are fractional compared to what they were.
If you go throughout the years, and again, let's look at the four different segments of the music business that we talked about. Let's say you're Carole King, Jerry Goffin, and you write a number one tune in 1967. What kind of money, on an average, could you get from a million seller?
In 1967, or you mean since?
No, in 1967.
Okay, so back in the early 60s, a monumental record could be 2 million, 3-4 million max, maybe 5 as time went on. Now, back in those days, the statutory rate, which was government issued to pay per mechanical royalty, meaning per sale, was somewhere in the 5 to 6 cents, and it continues to go up every year. It's up to 9.1 cents per track.
So what's the math on that? So
let's do it.
Records. Yeah,
let's figure it out. If it's 5 cents, and you sell a million copies, that's 5 million cents. So what is that? $50,000?
Right, 50,000.
Okay, so if you take it up through the 80s and 90s, where I sold 27 million records and it was paying somewhere in the 8 cents, you could do the math, and that doesn't include the largest source of income on a hit, which is radio and performance. So, the truth be told, you may now bear in mind that in 1965, 50K plus radio income was not such a bad thing.
No, it's a big number back then.
It's a big number, right? And of course, in the 70s and 80s and even through the 90s, those numbers continued to grow astronomically. The infrastructure, the record business at large. Now, you got to remember something. There was major companies that were controlling what material was even made available to get into the top 100. So as a musician or as a writer, if you were in that system, you had you were one of a smaller number of people in the business that were already being forced basically down the throats of the consumer. Tower Records only has so much shelf space, and there's only 100 slots on that chart. But today, contrary to popular belief, at large, the music business is bigger than it's ever been, because rather than one person selling 1 million records, you've got 1 million people selling one record, except that that's true all over the world. So every kid with a laptop and GarageBand is making records and putting them up for sale. So the numbers at large are much, much bigger than they were. If you look at iTunes, it's got more tracks on it than ever existed in the history of the music business. But each record individually sells less.
We're with Peter Rafelson. Peter, let's pretend you're a 20-year-old in 2012. You have your own studio. You're a songwriter. What do you do? What's your advice to them?
Well, the first thing that I say is reach out and connect with as many people as possible. Some people feel that they have to stay pure to who they are in themselves, and that it's selling out if you try to go and collaborate with everybody you can. And I say selling out is a luxury, but that's really not what it is. The truth is it's about connecting and building your network. What you bring to the table is everything besides your talent. So if you bring connections, and if you can make connections, and if you have any opportunities, I don't care if it's about, hey, my uncle knows the radio buyer from Ralph's Market, and we have a chance to do a jingle. If you can present opportunities to other business people, they'll be more inclined to work with you and use what you do and what you want to do. So think like a businessman. Don't just think of yourself as limited to a pen and paper or a laptop in a studio making stuff in a bubble. Reach out. It's an industry, guys, and that's why we call it the entertainment business. So that's the crucial thing, is the human skills, the social skills that allow you to connect with others. You can be the best at what you do, but if you're an island, no one will ever know about you.
You've been at it in different aspects of the business, or different stages in the music business. What was your favorite?
Well, that's a great question, because the truth is it's changed. You almost can't compare them. And yes, it's all part of one business. Being young and hungry and given the opportunity to be involved in monumental projects with monumental artists, everybody from Elton John to Fleetwood Mac to, the Pointer Sisters. I did a lot, and the list goes on and on and on. And just being able to be in the presence of magnificence and prose. There's nothing more exciting, especially when you're aspiring. But bear in mind that at that stage of one's career, you're really looking just to be involved. You're not driving the ship, so to speak. So that's definitely a big part of it for me. That was probably the early, really the 80s, which was a very interesting time. And you look back and the pop music and the song format and the craft of songwriting still existed in and of itself. The 90s, again, was fascinating because it spawned a revolution of new and sort of knee-jerk reaction to pop music, and you got into all of the guitar-driven stuff, which everything from, punk music to alternative rock. And being a guitar player, that was exciting because I could now integrate something that I wasn't really allowed to take full advantage of in the synth days. But to finish up your question, being a businessman and an entrepreneur today is my favorite day because it is the wild, wild west out there. And if you can think of it, there's a way to do it yourself. You no longer have those barriers of entry. You better be smart, you better be ambitious, and follow it to the nth degree. You can't let up 1 second. I'm working harder now than I ever have in my life, but I'm doing whatever I choose to do, and that's a beautiful thing that never could exist up until recently.
I'm just reminding the audience we're talking to Peter Rafelson.
Turning Point with Frank MacKay returns right after this. Welcome back to Turning Point with Frank MacKay.
We are talking to Peter Rafelson. Peter is experienced as you can be in the music business, in songwriting, in production, the studio world, the music world. Peter, who was your mentor? And let's exclude family members.
Sure. I've had a few. Certainly, working with producers like Richard Perry, who produced. He was one of the top.
Barbra Streisand.
Yep, Barbara I worked with in his studio. That was some of the best experience I've had. And it really didn't teach me anything musical, but it taught me about the business and the social behavior that is required to be in this business. And he was a genius at it. He still is. He's with Jane Fonda today and his future wife. So, I mean, my gosh, the guy he was a powerhouse, and being around folks like that and all of their friends and co-workers certainly was a major lesson to me. That was like going to college in the music business. But then again, you look at guys like Burt Bacharach and some of the top writers, even David Foster, who, and people love him, people hate him, but he's undeniably talented and he's a genius. So I want to say that the people that not only gave me a break, but that I always looked up to and to this day admire as co-workers, were also my mentors coming up. The list is extensive, and really I try to find the value and the beauty in every single relationship, big or small. Some of the people I admire the most are complete unknowns who I'm helping to give a break to, and that's the attitude. You have to stay young, fresh. You have to be a student of life and of culture. I call myself a student of youth culture because that's really what drives this business. And if you can stay in that frame of mind, there's something to gain from just about any situation, and look for that. It's a chance to be a hero every moment of your life.
Let me ask you this, but keep in mind the broader sense of it. How does someone catch your attention? You mentioned these young people trying to reach out to you and trying to get you. How does somebody catch your attention?
Great question. Okay. So, from the perspective of being a label owner, I'm constantly looking for talent and artistry. And there are three kinds of artists in my philosophy. There's the diva. You can count them: Aretha, Mariah, Whitney, rest her soul, and Christina, and Celine Dion, basically. And those are what are called amazing singers, and the audience's response is, I love her voice. Okay, and those are far and few between. They don't have to do anything pretty much but sing like a bird and make you cry. And then the second category of artist is a singer-songwriter, and these are usually people that play an instrument. If you look at Sheryl Crow or Vanessa or Carlton or Bob Dylan, I mean, my gosh, you can go back in time. These are people who have the ability. John Mayer is a great example, who are talented musicians, songwriters, and can sing, and basically are self-contained. And that's always something that people respond to by saying, I love that song. It's the song-driven artist. And then the third category, which actually is one of the larger, most profitable categories, is what we call a lifestyle artist. And these are people that range from everybody from Britney Spears to Lady Gaga, although Gaga is an exception in that she writes and plays quite well. But ultimately, it's their lifestyle that drives you, and the audience response to those artists is, I love her. So those are the three areas that you focus on when you're trying to find something that's special. And that's when it comes to artists. And from a label perspective, that's what I look for. Now, if you're looking at a pure songwriter, because I also am in that business, You have to find something that moves you to the extent that 30 seconds will change your life. And what that means is, in 30 seconds, if you can't create something or provide something that will stay with you for the rest of your life, it's probably not necessarily a given that you're going to have a hit. If you look at the most recent phenomena, Gangnam Style, which is a Korean track from an artist named Psycho, this became the number one most viral YouTube video in pretty much quickest in history to go to the top. And it's in Korean. And nobody knows what the hell he's talking about. And I happen to, because I've been very well versed in Asian pop music, and I create it.
Is that
and
true?
I'm a part of that.
That's true.
However, the point I'm making is, what makes that a hit? And it's the vicious groove. It's the combination of the visuals, the video, the comedy, the humor, and it gets to everybody on so many different levels, and that's without even having any English. You know, there's one or two lines in English. So there you go. It's that factor that affects you from the gut, something that has impact, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be the same. As a music supervisor, I always look for something. I get a lot of submissions, and too many to listen to every single note of every song.
Are most of them electronic at this point?
No, in fact, there's a huge part of music supervision and of the business that's actually gone quite acoustic and back to almost folk music.
I meant, are you getting MP3s sent to you, or are you getting hard discs sent to you for the most part?
Good question. People still mail hard disks all the time, and it's generally an impersonal thing, believe it or not, because to get permission to submit is something that we try to keep to a one-on-one basis, and at that point I'll request an MP3 given my choice.
What was the turning point in your life, or if you prefer, what was the turning point in your career?
It's a great question. You know, I'm compelled to say that it was when I lost the fear of failure. And I don't know if people know what that means, but I can explain it. Every day I wake up terrified. And I'm not afraid of failing, but it drives me. And I want to say that once I had a few hits, you know, everybody says the first one's luck, the second one, you know, or is chance or whatever. The third, by the time you've had 2 or 3 hits, now you really have to define: is this something you can continue doing? And people put immense pressure on themselves and receive a lot of pressure. So for me, I want to say, when I decided, after having some big hits, to take things into my own hands and not be afraid of trying anything, that was a huge change for me, because I realized, my gosh, there's so little in life that one gets to control and choose. So whatever you do have a choice to do, make it matter. And that was a huge turning point for me, because I realized, my God, this isn't luck. This isn't just an opportunity. And I can no longer blame anybody for not getting the shot I deserved. This is in my hands now. You better get used to it. And from that point forward, I became a businessman. And that was the turning point for me, because had I not done that, Frank, I would not be in this business anymore. I'd be waiting in line like everybody else in hopes for a break. And things just don't happen that way.
You made the point about fear of failure and conquering fear of failure. Do you believe there's a fear of success out there for certain people, or is that just another way of saying fear of failure?
You know, I've heard the term. I don't know that I quite understand it in its face meaning, but I can tell you what I see a lot, which is that people tend to anticipate success without having it. And that translates to others as fear of failure because they've already sort of like made up their minds. The only thing I can say is never make up your mind other than you're going to do something. Whether it's successful or whether it's a failure, only time can tell. But the only choice you have is whether you're going to do it or not. You can't choose whether it's going to be a success or a failure. So I think that people are more afraid of the lack of control they may have, and that may be interpreted as fear of failure. But the truth is, you have control. You have the choice to respond and the choice to act on something, whether it's your dream or whether it's your plan. Those are the things that you have control over. And if you're scared of not having control, you'll never get anything done. So control, fear of failure, fear of control, fear of success, to me, it's all about fear of yourself. Can you make a decision and do it regardless of the outcome? That's what people tend to be most afraid of. And my advice is do it. Do it. You know, don't have to kill yourself, but you might want to just see how close you can get.
You know, you've been at this so long. You've learned so much along the way, and you're an expert. You're certainly an expert on the music business, on all these different aspects. Are you still learning?
Every day. I mentioned earlier, I consider myself a student of youth culture, and I learn more from 7-year-olds than I do from 70-year-olds. Everybody's got something to teach, but the first thing I'll do is when I meet a new child, I'll say, "What's cool?" And they'll look at me completely fascinated. No one has ever asked them that question. And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "What's cool?" And the moment I explain to them that I'm interested in what they think is cool, what they are attracted to, they just light up and can't, wait to show me what they do, what they know, what they find, what they hear. I'm a student forever, and that means of everything from technology to the legal business to the music business to copyrights and assets and the future of business, but also to the human nature of what we do. That's where it all comes back to. You gotta know about what drives people, and that's what we do. We try to do something that matters to others, not just to ourselves. And truly, it's the greatest reward. When I heard my first song on the radio and I pulled up to a stoplight and I looked over to my left and there were 4 girls in a convertible standing up and dancing, and I rolled down my window, and sure enough, they were dancing to one of my songs. And I realized, oh my God, this connects me to the rest of the world and the universe and to people. And of course, I was so excited, I started screaming at them and pointing at the music and saying, "That's my son." They probably thought I was insane, but that was a moment I'll never forget. Seeing others with something that you've done and deriving joy and humanity from that. That's I'll always be a student of that.
Is there someone or something that you passed on, whether it's a song or an...
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I mean, many, but I was asked to write and produce Fiona Apple's record, and they had no money, and I was cocky, and I said, "Guys, you telling me you can't come up with demo money?" And within 2 years of that, she had a #1 album, and I was like, why did I just try to
work it out,
to glean a couple $100 for demo money when I could have been writing with one of the future greats? But the truth is, every day there are missed opportunities, and every day there are opportunities to be taken. And there's no looking back, guys. Just pursue. And if you're in question, follow your heart. But I don't say no much anymore to just anything that sounds like it has a shot, I'm interested in. I may not devote all my life savings and time to it, but I want to be involved, even if it's in a small way, even if it's an executive producer or a mentor or just letting somebody have access to myself and resources and giving them advice. Connecting to as much as possible keeps you in the loop.
Do you have a farm system? In other words, are there producers who work under you? Are there...
I do. In fact, there are on a daily basis anywhere from 5 to 10 people in my building, either working with me, working on their own stuff, working on company stuff for us. But it is definitely a collaborative business. To this day, I'll sit and start, write, sing, produce, mix, and finish records completely on my own, which I just love doing because it's one of the only art forms that you can really complete entirely to yourself. But if you're going to do it in a room with closed doors and only that way, you'll never meet anybody. So the greatest gift in music business is that you get to meet people and travel and do things that take you into other worlds and other businesses that you could never get access to if you just, were working alone. So in the sense that there's a community or a community effort or the connection of others, there's nothing wrong with working alone, but it's a lonely existence, and you won't learn anything from yourself. I love having young kids all around me every day with their ideas, and some are good, some suck, but guess what? If you don't ask, you'll never know. If you don't try, if you don't listen to other people's ideas, you won't learn anything, or you may miss an opportunity to make something better. So we love to share.
In closing, what do you do from here? You've done just about everything you can do in the music business. You've achieved all types of things, gold records, number ones. Where do you go from here?
I ask myself that question every day. And I try not to look back. I always try to look forward. I am a voracious reader of what the future may look like. And truth be told, nobody knows. But I know one thing, that I can help create the future. So I continue to strive and to excel at finding new ways to do things. I am involved in software engineering. I'm involved in entrepreneurship. I'm involved in investment. I'm involved in speaking, both motivational and at business seminars. I'm involved heavily in the world of computers and technology, but also with the blessing of being able to continue creating and writing and producing certainly what makes me personally happy, but hopefully what makes others happy as well.
Peter Rafelson, from the world of music and the music business, has been our special guest today. Peter, thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure, and I'll do this anytime you want.
We need a part 1 and a part 2 and a part 3 for this, Peter. You're an incredible guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Our special guest today has been producer extraordinaire, Peter Rafelson. Thanks for tuning in.
Turning Point with Frank MacKay is brought to you by Herman, Katz, Conjemi & Klein, Duffy & Duffy, Gold Coast Bank, Heartland Business Center, Morgan Stanley and Smith Barney of PC Wealth Management, and the Hagedorn Little Village School in Seaford, New York. Turning Point with Frank MacKay was produced by GVP Digital Media in Ronkonkoma, New York. Executive producers Frank MacKay and Harry Oates. Associate producers Kristen and John MacKay. Audio and studio engineering Brittany Fergo and Francis Kazmarek. Hotel and accommodations provided by Ohika Castle Hotel and Estates in Huntington, New York. Transportation services provided by Mark of Elegance Limousine in Hauppauge, New York. Catering services provided by Chella Bagels of Selden, New York.